Hi there, and thank you for tuning in. Are you new to bird photography? Do you need help with how to take better bird photos? Or are you still struggling to find birds to photograph? In this video, I want to share with you 4 bird photography tips for beginners you may have never heard before. Back as a beginner bird photographer, I thought I understood what I needed to do, or more importantly, what I needed to buy in order to get some great bird photos. But as with so many things, hindsight is 20/20, and I had made some big mistakes. When I started out, I was hyper-focused on the camera gear and settings. My focus was on buying the right camera gear and having that set up with the perfect settings for bird photography. But that only got me so far. It always seemed like I was missing something. My bird photos were good, just not as good as I thought they could be. The idea for this video really hit me during my last outing when I was searching for some birds to photograph. If you're like me, the weekends are about the only time I can find to take pictures of birds, and searching for birds or new locations can take up all of that time. So what little time I do have, I try to make the most of it. Lately, I seem to be driving all over the place with no luck in spotting birds to photograph. Then it hit me. 4 simple things that I've learned to do and have forgotten about. And that's how I came up with these 4 unusual yet simple bird photography tips for beginners. Tip number 1, arrive early. I know, sounds simple and it is, but not always one we take seriously. For some reason we get hooked on thinking that a new lens or special secret camera setting is going to make all our bird photos great. But arriving early is one of the easiest and cheapest things we can do. If you want to capture bird photos more easily, you need to follow their habits, and one of the biggest ones is getting up early in the morning like they do. Birds wake up when the sun is rising, and as bird watchers know, this is an ideal time to observe birds doing what they do, foraging and tending to their daily tasks. Perfect time for capturing great bird photos. Take this beautiful blue male Indigo Bunting you've been watching. I was out driving early in the morning and stumbled across it. I was literally driving down a country road when something caught my eye. I pulled over and spotted this brilliant blue bird in the middle of a sea of green. Lucky for me, this bird had a specific purpose and wasn't scared off by me. I made my way into the bushes where I saw him with my camera in hand and started snapping away. This male bird was feeding its young, and almost like clockwork, it would show up on the same branch with breakfast in its beak, ready to feed its young. This led me to tip number 2, listen and learn, then return. I watched and listened to the birds around me, including this Indigo Bunting. What I quickly realized was there were 2 species in this small area. The other bird was a song sparrow. It was almost like these 2 birds were synchronizing between themselves on whose turn it was to land on the bush. As the Indigo Bunting left, the song sparrow would arrive. They used slightly different branches to land on, and I quickly learned which branch each preferred, requiring me to pay attention to more than just what I saw in front of me. I could hear both of them chirping behind me a couple of minutes before they'd swoop in and land on their favorite branch. I must have been in the same location for at least 2.5 hours on the first day. It ended up raining that day, so I decided to pack it in. Each day I tried to arrive as early as possible, knowing that the midday sun would be both difficult to take photographs in, and the birds are often in the shade during this time of day. I even tried a couple of evenings, but had no luck. I was surprised that this one little location could have so much activity and a great opportunity for bird photography. As a bird photographer, these moments are what we hope for, and I was very lucky to have captured these photos. So the second tip for new bird photographers is really about understanding the environment so well that you can anticipate where the birds are going to land, so you can be at the right place to capture the shot. Also, by returning to the same location over and over, things begin to become familiar to you, and in turn, this allows you to see more of what's happening in that location. Unfortunately, what took place for over a week at this location ended up having a sad ending. If you want to find out, stay to the end of the video where I'll share with you what happened to this beautiful Indigo Bunting bird. The next 2 tips kind of relate to each other. Tip number 3, get close. Why is getting closer to the birds so important? Can't a longer lens do the trick? Getting closer is one of those tips that sounds like a minor thing, but after you've tried it and are successful at it, you'll soon see why it's in my top bird photography tips for beginners. Getting closer changes a number of things. First, you don't need a massive, expensive lens. You'll have more opportunities for better compositions and new opportunities to take photos of the birds. And most importantly, you'll be able to adjust exposure settings, like lowering the ISO and increasing the shutter speed. ultimately giving you sharper photos of the birds. As mentioned in tip number 2, returning to the same location over and over gives you a few benefits. First, you have different lighting. You can see the birds acting differently. These can also lead to you finding new locations to shoot from that are closer to the birds. In some cases, the birds start to get used to you and curious about you, and they'll fly closer to you, giving you a better opportunity to capture them. This is often the case with smaller birds. A few things to remember when you're trying to get closer is to make as little noise as possible, stay relatively still and calm, and try to blend in a little. A simple trick to blending in other than wearing camo is to tuck yourself into the bush a little near trees or overgrown shrubs. You're not going to blend in 100%, but you're also not going to stand out. So these are some of the main reasons I added this tip in. Getting closer to the birds to reduce many things that ultimately translate into a blurry photo. So next time you're out taking bird photos, think of this simple tip and try to find a way to get closer to the bird. Take it slow and calm, let the birds get used to you, and look for new locations you can take photos from to give your bird photos a distinct look. So this brings me to my last beginner bird photography tip, and one that tends to be the most controversial. Tip number 4 is don't buy the biggest lens you can get. I'm going to assume that if you're watching this video that you're in fact a beginner bird photographer and money is a hurdle that you can't overcome. Before you rush out and buy the biggest lens you can afford, you might want to consider this tip I tell every new bird photographer. The science behind this tip is pretty straightforward, and I think this image captures the issue. Let's look at 2 lenses you might use for bird photography, the 70 to 200mm and the 150 to 600mm lenses, to illustrate things. First, let's say you were shooting with a medium telephoto lens, the 70 to 200mm lens. I know it sounds like a small lens for bird photography, but it's not. The photos you've been looking at have all been taken with a 70 to 200mm lens. To top it off, this lens is a workhorse for so many other things than bird photography. So, with a 70 to 200mm lens, you have around a 24-degree angle of view. With the bird moving around and you trying to hold the camera steady, your chances of capturing a good, sharp image of a bird are pretty high. As a beginner bird photographer, this is very important. You need some success so you can learn more and push yourself in other areas of bird photography. Now let's take the extreme end, the 600mm end of the Sigma 150 to 600mm lens. Here is where things fall apart and fall apart quickly. At 600mm, you have about a 4-degree angle of view. You've just lost 83% of your angle of view. You now have almost 10% of what you had with the 70 to 200mm lens. Now, as a new bird photographer just starting out, you're certainly not going to buy a 600mm prime lens that's around $15,000. What you'll be drawn to is something like the Sigma 150 to 600mm sport lens for around $2,000. It all sounds good, but is it really? You'll now have the reach to get closer to the birds, but you've now introduced numerous challenges that as a beginner you will certainly struggle with. Why do I say this? I've been there and never had the kind of luck with this lens that I was expecting to have. So back to the science. As a bird photographer, you'll be out wandering around for hours. Imagine holding this lens freehand for hours. Your arms will start to feel like jello, and your ability to keep things still as you shoot will certainly be a challenge. You could mount it on a tripod and gimbal, and even though I'm a big fan of that, try lugging that around all day. And with the slow speed of this lens, you have a recipe for disaster. The challenge you'll have is a small field of view at 4 degrees, slow aperture of f6.3, which will need more sunlight, a slow focus motor in these lenses, arm fatigue sets in, making holding this lens steady more difficult, the need to increase shutter speed to well above the rule of 2 times the focal length, causing you to increase the ISO to compensate for a good exposure, all adding up to shots like this. Now don't get me wrong, it is possible to make this lens work, especially for larger birds on very bright days. But if you're just starting out in bird photography, one of the biggest tips is to not get sucked into the camera gear vortex of buying the biggest lens you can afford. So my final tip for beginner bird photographers is don't buy massive lenses thinking this will solve your challenges of getting closer. First, start with the best glass you can afford and work your way up from there. And as promised earlier in the video, I mentioned that there was a story about the Indigo Bunting bird that didn't end well. The reason I only had 2 weeks to capture this bird is that someone cut down about 10 trees in the small forested area on the roadside where these birds were nesting. I'm not sure why these trees were cut down, but whoever did it must have used a wood chipper and shot all the wood chips right on top of where the nest was. The day I went back to this location and saw the pile of wood chips and no sign of either the Indigo Bunting or the song sparrow, I knew it was devastating to them. I was shocked and stunned at what had happened. Even to this day, I can't wrap my head around it. There wasn't any obvious reason to cut these trees down. It just seemed senseless to me. I've headed back to this location over the past month several times, but no sign of them. I'll lock this location in the back of my mind for next year. With any luck, they'll return again to raise some young, and I'll capture some more photos and video of this beautiful bird. Well, I hope you found these unusual bird photography tips for beginners helpful, and if you have any tips that help you take better bird photos that are beyond the camera settings, please share them below in the comments. I'd like to thank you for tuning in and appreciate all the support I've received. Your comments and questions are often thought-provoking and inspire me for upcoming videos. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please hit that subscribe and notification button below so you won't miss my next video. And if you'd like to learn more about my bird photography and how I took each photo, check out my Instagram channel where I detail the birding camera and lens I used, along with the camera settings for each bird photo. Remember, it's your photography. Go shoot it.